Hello, and welcome to the MMA Mic Drop podcast. My name is Jade Bunky. This is episode 1, and let me introduce you to my co-host. His name is Milo McGregor, but you already know him on Instagram as Milo McShredder. He is one of the nation's top up-and-coming amateur surfers, and we're going to find out what he knows about MMA. Milo, what's up?
What's up, Baldy?
Yeah, I forgot to mention that Milo has a propensity to talk a little bit of smack, so you never know what he's going to say, so buckle up. All right, well, before we get started and before we break down UFC 295, I think some congratulations are in order. I heard you won your last NSSA contest.
Yeah, just this Saturday. I was super stoked on that.
Well, congrats on that. That's awesome. But I heard your dad failed miserably. He was in the finals. He made it to the finals, and he was winning the finals of the Newport Beach Board Riders contest in his age division. 40 seconds left. Then he dropped in on somebody and got called for an interference. Super
sad. I was super mad at him.
You were? Did he totally kook it?
I was calling him a kook.
Yeah. I also got word that in the podcast, or your mom was recording, and you can be heard yelling, "You idiot," really loudly in the background.
That sounds about right. I was pretty mad.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, let's get into UFC 295. This is an incredible card. It's Yuri Prochazka versus Alex Pereira. Now, originally, this was supposed to be Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic, but that fight has been canceled. And before we talk about Alex Pereira versus Yuri Prochazka, I want to talk about Jon Jones for a moment, because I think we actually have a more interesting fight in this replacement fight. And here's why. Now, it's always a privilege to watch Jon Jones fight. Many consider him the greatest fighter of all time, and there's really not much of a counter argument to that. But this fight was not to be about competition. It was about legacy. This was to be his masterpiece. This was to be his version of Monet's impression Sunrise, Van Gogh's Starry Night, or Rembrandt's The Night Watch. But it wasn't going to be that interesting from a competitive perspective, right? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I feel like this would be a better fight to watch, but watching Jon Jones is just it's a good way to end his career almost. Because this is most likely
and that's a good point,
fight.
because I think this was a legacy fight, right? Against Stipe's really old, right? And he looked old in his last fight against Francis Ngannou. When he lost, he looked old even when he retained his title against DC. Well before that, he hasn't looked good in quite some time. And for Jon Jones, what this would allow him to do is to really demonstrate his level of artistry in the heavyweight division over the greatest heavyweight champ of all time. But this heavyweight champ is just a shell of himself. And therefore, competitively, I don't think it was it would be that interesting outside of watching Jon Jones produce his masterpiece. So what I think we have with Tom Aspinall and Sergei Pavlovic is a much more interesting fight from a competitive perspective, but also, obviously from a rankings perspective, because this is for an interim heavyweight title. And we'll get to that in a moment. But first, let's break down Yuri Prochazka versus Alex Pereira. Pereira, the former middleweight champion, taking on Yuri Prochazka. Prochazka never lost his belt. He relinquished it by choice due to injury, and now this is his chance to get it back. This is an interesting matchup. Two, elite high-level strikers. What are your thoughts on this particular fight?
I think this is going to be a super good matchup. Alex Pereira has they both have a lot of power, but Yuri's chin is crazy, and he's taking a lot of big shots. So I think it'll be a really good fight, but I'll reveal my opinion in a little bit.
Okay, all right. Milo, keeping up the suspense for the listeners and the viewers. So that's interesting, though, that you said he has a good chin, because he took a beating against Glover Teixeira. He also delivered a beating as well. but was able to, make it through. Now, from my perspective, it's interesting. Both are, excuse me, really technical strikers, right? And I think Pereira is a more technical striker, and he's a little more measured. And the interesting thing, though, the caveat, though, for Pereira is that he is 36 years old. At some point, he's going to completely fall off, and he's still a little bit untested at light heavyweight, right? He beat Jan Blachowicz, but it was a little bit underwhelming considering what we saw him do at middleweight, right? So that's interesting. Now, Yuri Prochazka, he has 29 wins, and he's finished 28 of them, which is just absolutely incredible. And he's finished everyone he's faced in the UFC, too. So typically, sometimes you get people who come over in smaller promotions. They'll fight lower level talents and be more dominant. But this is a little bit different. This is, he's been, beating people at the UFC level. Not just beating, but finishing. And so I think that's fascinating. But give me Alex Pereira by third round knockout.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. I'm thinking third round knockout. Yeah.
Oh, really? Wow. Okay. Wow. So that's your pick. Any insights into that?
I think Yuri's gonna take a beating the whole fight.
Oh, wow. So you think it's gonna be completely one-sided?
I think Yuri's gonna get kicked hard a lot, and people are gonna think Alex knock him out, and he's just gonna get caught.
Nice.
Over and
over. But by a kick, by a punch, how's he gonna get caught?
Kick. Yep.
Where's it gonna land?
In the head.
Nice. Leon Edwards style, right?
Yep,
or
exactly.
Justin Gaethje. Okay,
just a remake
cool.
of it.
Yeah, and it's interesting. This is a fascinating fight. I don't see it going the distance. I think both guys are going to absolutely bring it. I do think Pereira is going to be a little more measured, a little more technical. Anything can happen, but we both have. I have TKO, but it looks like you have a clean knockout in the third round. Next up, we have Tom Aspinall versus Sergei Pavlovic. Now, this is the fight that I think is much more interesting than John Jones versus Stipe Miocic. Now, as I mentioned, the John Jones fight was more of a legacy fight, but this one is a fascinating fight. Tom Aspinall, I remember I was telling somebody a couple years ago that I thought he was the best heavyweight in the world then. He's been running through people in the UFC. His longest fight went to the second round. That's against Andrade Arlovski, and he choked him out pretty quickly in the second round. Pretty effortlessly it looked like. But what's really interesting about this is I think he would beat John Jones. I think he would destroy Francis Ngannou. Back then he would have. Now he definitely would have. And it brings up an interesting question about Ngannou. Did he get out at the right time? Because what we have is Sergei Pavlovic, who has, I would say, comparable power to Ngannou. Derek Lewis, and those are pretty much the three, right? That's the triumvirate of heavy hitters in just mixed martial arts in general, right? There's no one that on par with those three. And this is what makes this matchup so fascinating, is that Tom Aspinall has been dominant, but so has Sergei Pavlovic. Pavlovic lost his first fight, and it was against Alistair Overeem. Okay, that's your debut. You lost to a high-level heavyweight. Not much shame there, even though it was a pretty quick finish. But he's 18-1. That's his only loss. He's finished 15 of his fights, and he's finished every fight in the UFC in the first round. So since that loss to Alistair Overeem, he's won 5 straight, all by knockout, and that's happened quickly. Now, Tom Aspinall, he's won every UFC fight by finish. His only blemish on his record, that was when he tore up his knee against Curtis Blades, but that was 15 seconds in there into the fight. That had nothing to do with the competition. So he's pretty much unbeaten in the UFC. Now, with that said, I think Aspinall is better on the ground. He's really quick. He darts in and out. The only issue that I can see is he keeps his head up a little high, and he can be caught by Sergei, but I don't think he will. I don't think he will be. He's quicker on the feet. He's better on the ground. He doesn't have that much power, but he has power. I mean, he's big. He's 6'5", and in between fights, he was weighing in at, I believe, 275. That's what he posted on Instagram. And he's not fat. It's a big dude. But give me Tom Aspinall, second round submission to capture the interim heavyweight championship. What do you think?
I think third round for Yuri.
Wrong fight, dude.
The heck? I get these fights mixed up. I can't say that guy's name.
Yuri I'm sorry. You said because Yuri, it's Sergei. Yes, Sergei Pavlovic.
Okay. Sergei Pavlovic by third round knockout.
Wow, really? Well, yeah, he's knocked out everybody in the UFC. That's definitely not out of the question. I think Tom Aspinall is smart enough to keep his distance, to keep his distance and to get it to the ground quickly. Sergei might be able to survive that first round once it goes on the ground. I don't think he's going to be able to survive a second round. I don't think he's going to catch him, although he can. All it does is take one punch. I just don't think he's going to get that punch. So there you have it. Milo McGregor is taking Sergei Pavlovic by third round knockout. I'm taking Tom Aspinall by second round submission. When we do the recap, we'll see who's smarter. All right, next up we have Jessica Andrade versus Mackenzie Dern. I think this is an incredible fight as well. This entire card is stacked with good fights. What's fascinating, so Andrade, she's a power puncher, right? But she's getting older as well. She's lost 3 in a row, but they're all to high-level fighters. Mackenzie Dern is probably the best Brazilian jiu-jitsu practitioner on the female side in the UFC. She's fascinating to watch. Her stand-up is not as bad as it used to be. She was absolutely lights out in her last fight. Showed an improved all-around game. With that said, I think she's going to be able to take Jessica Andrade down. And when it gets to the ground, I think she's going to control her. And I don't think it's going to end well. I do think Andrade will escape the first round. But give me Mackenzie Dern by second round submission.
I'm going to say Mackenzie, by triangle.
Wow. Okay. Getting specific on the submission. And you should know, you've been doing jiu-jitsu for quite some time. How old were you when you started doing jiu-jitsu?
Probably around 8.
Wow. Awesome. So you can talk smack to me, but I can't talk smack back because you might get me in some painful submission. You'll get me in a triangle. Okay.
It's snip out because it's so bold. It'll just slide right out.
My head will just slide on out. There you go. Yeah. Have that Derek Lewis haircut. So there we go. So, all right, next up, and this is what I think is the best fight on the entire fight card. Benoit St. Denis versus Matt Frevola. St. Denis, let me just glance at his record here. This is how I do notes. I am the antithesis of a professional, so I may have to look to the side. He's 12-1. Frevola is 11-3. I like both guys. This fight will not go the distance. This will be a firefight. Benoit St. Denis, this dude's gnarly. He's French Special Forces, which, by the way, a message to John Anik, please stop calling him a Navy SEAL. He is not a Navy SEAL. I know what you're doing. I know you're a smart guy. I know you do your research. And I know you're probably trying to let your audience know that this is a gnarly guy. You're trying to let them know the scope to which this guy's a badass, and he certainly is. But he's definitely not a Navy SEAL, but he's super gnarly. He took a beating, but there's no quitting him. But we also got to remember that first fight he lost, it's the only fight he lost, not only in the UFC, in his entire career. He took it on short notice. He took it a weight class up. This guy is an absolute animal. He is 100% legit. But so is Matt Frevola. Matt Frevola has been knocking people out too. He just knocked out Drew Dober. That's a big win. Now, he did get flattened by Terrence McKinney in 7 seconds. And I must say this about Terrence McKinney. He is the best fighter in the UFC for 60 seconds. He can beat you on the ground. He can beat you on the feet. And getting knocked out by him is not as bad as it may seem, because this guy can do it to just about anybody in his weight division. The thing is, with Terrence McKinney, if it goes longer than 60 seconds, who knows what's going to happen. But with that said, Frevola, I think, is a little underrated. I think he's much better than what a lot of people think he is. And my gut, for some reason, is saying to pick St. Denis, but I'm going Frevola. This fight's not going to go long. Give me Frevola by second round TKO. What are your thoughts?
I think St. Denis, I mean, look at this guy. This guy's giant. He looks way too big for his weight class. I think I'm going to have to go with him. And a lot of these guys that lose their first fights always end up destroying everybody later.
Yeah, well, and what's interesting is he lost his first fight due to understandable circumstances, right? He's fighting a bigger guy up at a weight class that's not his weight class, right? He fought at welterweight. He's back down to lightweight, and he fought a good guy, and he did it on short notice as well, right? So there were a lot of things working against him. I agree with your sentiment on that. You're taking St. Denis. How and in what round?
Probably, I think probably second round choke.
Choke? What kind of choke?
Rear naked choke.
Rear naked choke. Wow. All right. We have more dissent. So let's move on to the next fight. Diego Lopes. Some people, I've heard people call him Diego Lopez or Diego Lopes, so I'm just going to call him Lopes. Apologies if I am mispronouncing his name. But he's going up against Pat Sabatini, and this is a fascinating matchup. Both are specialists on the ground. Both are incredible grapplers. I think both are absolutely exceptional. And I would not want to see them fight each other right now. I would rather each one fight a ranked person. Hey, look at the screen when we're doing a podcast. There you go. Good job. And I'm going to leave this in. I'm not going to edit it. Glance at your notes just subtly. Just don't stare at the other. Yeah, just don't stare at it. There you go. There you go. Awesome. All right. So, what was I saying? So, I think these guys are so high level on the ground. I would like to see each of them fight a ranked person before fighting each other. With that said, I think this is the best matchup, the most interesting matchup the UFC can make for two unranked guys in this weight division. I think this is fascinating. Now, if we look at Lopes, he came in on short notice against a top 10 ranked guy, had him in all sorts of trouble, took it to decision, and then in his second fight, submitted Gavin Tucker, I believe it was in the first round, made it look easy, effortless. Sabatini's won every fight in the UFC, except one that was Damon Jackson, but he's looked pretty dominant as well. I am completely torn on this, and I know so far, I've been picking everything by finish so far, and I think we're going to get another one. I think we're going to get Lopes. Give me Lopes by third round submission.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go Diego Lopes by second round bulldog choke.
A what?
Second round bulldog choke.
Bulldog choke. There you go. Awesome. All right. So next up, we have Steve Erceg versus Alessandro Costa. Erceg came in against David Dvorak, who was ranked number 10, and beat him, and he looked good. He's a submission guy. He's got really fluid kicks, really fluid style, fun to watch. I think this guy is really good. Costa, to be honest with you, I don't know much about Costa. I know I believe he's a submission guy as well, but I don't know that much. If you want really good a technical breakdown, I would encourage you to watch the Shillen and Duffy show at SureDog. These guys are awesome. They're smart, they're funny, and they're as technical as it gets in terms of MMA podcasting. So strong recommendation for that. With that said, I'm going to take Erceg. I like what I saw against a top level guy. And I think now it's his second fight in the UFC, a little more time to train. Give me Erceg by decision. Who are you taking?
Yeah, I'm going to go same thing. Erceg by decision, Steve decision.
Okay. Oh, decision. Okay. So next up, and as we go into the prelims, we're going to move through these much more quickly. We have Tabatha Ricci versus Lupita Godinez. I like both of them. Both of them are good fighters, but I think, let's see, Ricci, I believe, is number 10. I think Godinez is 13, 15, something like that. She's, in the top 15. I think they've both reached their ceiling. I don't think either of these women are actual top 10. With that said, either one could win. They're both really good. I'm taking Godinez by decision. Who are you taking?
I'm not going to really go with either.
What?
I think it's just going to go by decision. So somebody's going to win. It's going to be by split decision.
Okay, so split decision. You're going to pick a... Dude, you are terrible at making predictions. What's that? Okay, so Milo is just not going to pick anybody, but he's called how it's going to happen, split decision. It would be safer if you just said decision.
Half credit.
Half credit. Okay, we'll give you half credit if it goes by split decision. Well, hey, maybe if it's a draw. Maybe it's a draw, and then you could say, hey, nobody won, so there you go. All right, so next up, Mateusz Rebecki versus unknown fighter. We don't know who he's fighting. There's been a cancellation. So I'm taking Mateusz by decision, since I don't know who he's fighting.
I'm taking unknown fighter for sure.
Oh, man, you are bold. Do you know how the unknown fighter is going to beat Mateusz?
He's just going to fling him out of the ring into the crowd.
Wow, so WWF TKO, WWE TKO.
Yep.
Wow, awesome. Good stuff. What's that?
That's exactly what's about to happen.
All right, and as we are proven, we are definitely not Shilling and Duffy. All right, so next up we have Nazim Sadykhov versus Slava. I am not going to try to pronounce his name. I will butcher it. Slava's a kickboxer, very high-level kickboxer, but Sadykhov is well-rounded, and we saw him hang on the ground with McKinney. Now, he eventually beat McKinney. I think it was at the start of the second round. There was some debate about him grabbing the fence out of the cage and everything, but the fact that he was able to hang on the ground with Terrence McKinney, because as I mentioned, in the first 60 seconds of the fight, this guy is lights out on the ground or on the feet. And why I think that's important is Slava sucks on the ground. He has no takedown defense. He can't do anything once an opponent gets him there. And so I'm thinking Sadykhov, first round submission. What are your thoughts?
I'm going to say Slavikov by decision.
By decision. All right. So next up, somebody is going to get put to sleep in this fight, but it is not going to be either of the fighters. It is going to be everyone watching. Jared Gordon versus Mark Madsen. This is a snooze fest of the highest order. I am completely uninterested in watching this fight. If you have to go to the store, if you have to use the restroom, this is the time to do it. This fight's going to be pretty boring. The problem is Madsen's old. He's 39. Gordon is 35. Why would I want to watch two unranked middle-aged fighters fight that will clinch and come to a decision, and that will ultimately end in a decision? See, Madsen had potential, right? He was a silver Olympic medalist. He had potential. He's a great wrestler, but he just doesn't fight that often, and now he's too old to do anything of interest. So I'm just not interested in either of these guys. Give me Gordon by a slow, painful, boring decision. Who do you have?
I think it's going to end in the first round.
Wow, really? How? And by whom?
They probably think everybody's like talking crap about like their fight being super boring, so they're going to try to bring it, and somebody's going to get knocked out, I hope.
Well, who's going to get knocked out?
Gordon.
Wow. Okay. All right. Wow. So the wrestler is going to knock out Gordon, even though he's 39 years old. Okay. Awesome. All right. Next up, John Castaneda versus Kyung Ho Kang. And excuse me, I'm probably butchering his name. Again, I'm going to go with the younger fighter on this one. Castaneda's much younger. Kang looked really good in his last fight, but I believe he's 36, and he's going to pretty much fall off pretty quickly. I'm going with Castaneda by decision. Who do you take, or who are you taking?
Same, Castaneda by decision.
Okay. Next up, we have Joshua Van versus Borjas. Again, I watched Borjas on the Contender Series. Van came in, and, again, short notice. He beat Zumagulov, which, despite his bad record, is actually a pretty decent fighter. And Zumagulov has the worst haircut in the UFC. And I think Diego Lopes is going to give him a run for his money. And I probably should juxtapose those two photos of those individuals, when we edit this podcast, because you really got to see just how bad it is. But Zumagulov, I know he's not fighting. Joshua Van, as I mentioned, beat him. Do you know he has 2 wives?
What?
Yes, he has 2 wives.
Wow, he's hustling.
He's hustling, yeah. So anyways, I'm going to take Borjas. I'm going to take decision. I've done no tape study on either of these individuals. I am just going on pure gut here, using the Milo technique. But Milo tends to be right a lot, so that's what's interesting. So if you're going to place bets listening to this, 1, don't. That's just stupid. But 2, if you do, listen to Milo. His analysis, don't know how he comes up with it, but it works.
Who'd you go with?
Borjas.
That guy's getting knocked out.
Seriously, are you just saying that because I'm going with him? Okay, all right. What round? All right, what round?
Third,
all right. The next one, we have Denis Buzukja. I don't know how to pronounce his name. I'm just going to call him Denis. He's going against Jamall Emmers. Now, this is really interesting. Jamall Emmers is actually a pretty good fighter. I think he's just had some bad luck in the UFC. His last fight against Jack Jenkins, he lost a close decision, but I thought he actually won that fight. Jack Jenkins is a good fighter. I think this is a fascinating matchup. I am going to take I'm going to take Jamall Emmers by decision, but I think it's going to be a pretty dominant decision.
Yeah, Jamall Emmers by decision.
Awesome. All right, so we covered each fight card, or so now we've covered each fight. And what I want to do is I want to grade the card, right? And there's 2 ways in which we can grade it. One, I want to ask you what's your grade in terms of level of excitement, and then what's your grade in terms of quality of the card. And let's flip that. First off, let's talk about quality of the card. Where do you grade this as in terms of quality of the card?
I think I want to go B+ with it, because I feel like there's a lot of underrated fighters in this. I feel like Tom Aspinall is really underrated, and Yuri's really underrated. So I think that's what's cool about this card.
It's cool, yeah. Now what's interesting, you're saying Prochazka is underrated. How is he underrated when he's the former champ?
Because I feel like he's not as talked about as Alex Pereira.
He doesn't have the same hype, yeah.
But he's at that level.
So you think people just kind of forgot how good he was in capturing the fight, and then do you think maybe some people think he's just not as technical as he needs to be to fight somebody like Pereira?
Yeah, there's that aspect too.
Yeah, okay, no, that makes sense. I see where you're going there. Yeah, Tom Aspinall, I think people are starting to pay attention, and you're right, because I don't think people realize how good he is, where I think he is unequivocally the best heavyweight in the world. And if we are to rank heavyweights, right now across all promotions, I would take Tom Aspinall, number 1. I would maybe Pavlovic, number 2. It'd be interesting to see him and John Jones, because we haven't seen John Jones fight for more than 2 minutes. And it would be interesting to see what a stand-up is like, with that extra weight. How does he move over the course of several rounds and so forth? And then even what happens to his wrestling if he gets pulled into deep water. I think, Aspinall, again, beats John Jones. I think Sergei, maybe John Jones, number 3, even though he is the current champ. I would put Gelton Almeida as number 4, and then I'd put Francis Ngannou as number 5. And I wanted to put that out there just to let everyone know the magnitude of this particular fight, how good I think it's going to be, and how good both guys are, Tom Aspinall and Sergei Pavlovic. Regardless of who wins, I don't think the career's over for either one. I think they're going to be, right back in contention, and they're going to be a problematic matchup for just about anybody. So given that those two are on the fight card, given that you have a championship fight with Pereira and Borshchev, given that you're going to have an all-out war with Saint Denis versus Frevola, with a lot of other fights that are incredibly competitive and interesting, I'm going to give it an A-. The only reason why it doesn't get a higher score or a higher grade is because of that Mark Madsen and Gordon fight. Actually, the first 3 fights on the card are a little uninteresting, right? And it's fine. I mean, they're good card fillers, and there's nothing wrong with that. And it's an A- card. This is an exceptional card. That's the thing that's keeping me from, it's an A+ all the way, or an A. But I think it's a strong A-. I think it's a must-watch card. That's in terms of quality. I give it an A-. You give it a B+. Now, how would you grade your level of excitement for this card?
I would say an A- because I think I would go lower, but I love watching Pereira fight. He's such a fun stand-up fighter to watch, and there's 2 stand-up fighters actually, so it's much more fun than watching the wrestling.
Yeah. It's going to be a firefight on the feet for sure. And it could be maybe a real technical fight because Pereira is pretty methodical in his approach. As for myself, I give it an A+ in terms of excitement. I love watching Tom Aspinall fight, and there's injury. Did I say I love watching Tom Aspinall fart? Whoops. Well, yeah. Can you see farts? I don't know. I don't know how you can watch somebody fart. That's kind of interesting, but hey. So anyways, I love watching Tom Aspinall fight. He's absolutely incredible. But there's intrigue because Sergei Pavlovic is that dangerous. And the other fights that I mentioned, this fight card is absolutely stacked. I can't wait to watch it. A+. All right, we're going to do 2 more things before we conclude this podcast. The first thing is we're going to each name what are the 3 fights that we're most interested in watching. And then we're going to close on a Kook of the Week segment, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So what are rank your top 3 fights that you're most excited to watch?
So definitely the Pereira fight, number 1, then Tom Aspinall, and then probably the Saint Denis fight.
I think you nailed it. Number 1 for me is the Tom Aspinall fight. Number 2, which I think is going to be the best fight, Saint Denis and Frevola. And number 3 for me, though, I'm most interested in Lopes versus Sabatini. I find that matchup fascinating. Okay, last thing, and this is what we're going to do going forward. We're going to recap this fight card, and after we recap it, or as we recap it, we're going to give predictions for the following one. But what we're going to do is we're going to always have a segment called Kook of the Week. Is it a ref that kooked? Is it a particular fighter that kooked? We haven't had one. We didn't have one right now. We didn't have a fight card to analyze. But with that said, Milo, do you have a kook of the week?
I'm looking at it right now.
You're looking in the mirror?
It's you.
I'm the kook of the week. Wow, right away. Milo, with the last word, huh?
Congratulations on that.
I appreciate it. I'll savor my my victory or my achievement. But there you go. Milo just dropped the mic. We're out.